Hello, hello, people of the internet. Ian Altosaar, the Freedom Astrologer, here once again and doing another one of my videos. And this time, I'm going to kind of bring together um, concepts of maybe healing deeper layers of hurt, pain, patterns, and I'm going to use a chart here from an astrological point of view as an example. And I'm also going to bring in kind of like the real world example as well, and kind of illustrate how we can move past our pains and hurts and kind of learn patterns that we learned, um, at times from childhood. Now, in this example, we're going to use the example of relationships in this video, and we're going to talk about a very kind of deep pattern. So, when we're talking about relationships, the first kind of role models, the first impressions of relationships, we always get, from our parents. So, if the situation is quite extreme, and maybe there were, deep patterns that you saw and witnessed with your parents and in their relationship, where there was abuse going on. Maybe one of them was abusing the other. There was difficult situations going on in the relationship between your mother and father, or your maybe adoptive parents, or someone who was the kind of the role model in your formative years. In the formative years, I mean usually from 1 to 8, and these are the years where really the experiences kind of mold us, kind of give us very long lasting imprints of things, of patterns that are going to influence us later on in our own relationships, in our own working lives, in our lives in general. So now, if you have more difficult role models, for example, or difficult example of a relationship, when maybe there was cheating, maybe one was even mentally unstable, and kind of using that mental instability to also wreak havoc in that relationship. So you're going to, as a young child, you're going to pick up on those imprints, those patterns, and you're going to attract these into your grown-up relationships. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video, to kind of illustrate how you can start to move past that. And I know a lot of people are even giving up on relationships, and not even don't want to go into them, because again the same pattern kind of um repeats. Let's put it that way. And a lot of that, one of the biggest reasons for that is because in that early childhood, you as a child don't know how to process everything emotionally, kind of physically. You don't know how to understand that what you're seeing, maybe they're fighting, maybe they're yelling at each other, maybe they're using you as a puppet there, between them in their games. And there are so many examples of what can happen, but we're talking about abusive, more difficult relationships. And the important part here is to understand also, very often you as a child go into these spaces of and very natural spaces of judgment towards these relationships. And as a child, you go into, for example, go into a place of, oh, I'm not never going to do this, I don't ever want to have the same thing in my relationship. And then the judgment of, this is bad, or he is bad, or she is bad, happens. But the weird thing about judgments and these type of energetic imprints is that whenever there's that type of judgment, when and it also very often turns into suppression of these things, kind of trying to suppress as much of these patterns as possible. What instead ends up happening subconsciously, these things are still there as in energetic imprints of places, let's say places that as a child you didn't process, you didn't, kind of be with yourself because you didn't know. And now one of the reasons, or one of the kind of implications of that is subconsciously you will be creating that same situation constantly in your adult life through your own relationships until you integrate those spaces into yourself, or let's say with yourself. And then the judgment starts to kind of release, that energetic, let's say, imprint starts to release, starts to heal, let's put it that way. And then you're able to attract better relationships. Now let's bring in some astrology as well here. And I've picked a chart here to kind of illustrate, because the ruler of the first, or the first house is always you, and the seventh house is always the kind of relationship, the long-term relationship, the marriage relationship. Now, if you're into astrology already, you know that the rulers of the houses are really, really important, and where they go in a chart are really important. And in this case, we have a couple of things that kind of may indicate, more difficult relationships. So I picked this chart especially to illustrate this. And we have, first and foremost, we have a north node in the seventh house, which can already kind of attract kind of, maybe people at first into your life who might not have the cleanest of intentions at times. And maybe they're it's one of the kind of positions that is an indication that there might be some cheating weirdness going on in the relationship. But it's just, I'm going to emphasize this is just one of those things there, and you usually need more. Now, the second part here in this chart is the ruler. The ruler of the seventh house, the relationship, the partner, goes into the 12th house. Now, this is already quite a big deal. Again, indicates, some cheating. And also, I want to just bring in the themes that we've been discussing here. It's also a very strong indication that one of the parents might have done something, that was to do with cheating, that was to do with kind of going outside of the marriage or the relationship. And now you saw it, and you judged it as bad, and now you start to attract it into your relationships as well. But also it's a thing where the ruler of the seventh in the 12th, it's also again that the partner you might be attracting there, and the relationship. Remember, seventh house is the relationship in general. The relationship in general can have, hints of imbalances, of arguments, because it's the sixth from the seventh. And remember, guys, if you know about the sixth house is very, very a difficult house, which talks a lot about addictions, addictive behaviors, problems, arguments. And now when we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, when we go into that kind of using derivative houses, you start to understand that the relationship itself, or the partner itself, brings kind of like the sixth house topics into the relationship, as well as the relationship itself brings the 12th house topics, which is, hidden things, kind of secretive things, into the relationship. So this is another indication that, some problems might have existed in this person's parents' relationship, and now they're attracting these types of themes into their own life as well. Now, a couple of things even more, because I really like this chart to illustrate this point, because there are so many things happening here, and we're seeing the ruler here, Mercury in the sign of Scorpio as well. So again, Scorpio, not the easiest of energy to kind of channel in this lifetime. Let's put it that way. Again, transformation, hidden things, taboo topics. Again, a little bit jealousy, power dynamics, power games in the relationship. Not the easiest of course to handle. So you can see that there are many things kind of piling up in the chart that kind of suggest, this person might have, problems in the relationships, or the patterns that they picked up during childhood were maybe not the easiest to handle. Now, to even add to that, the ruler of the seventh house is conjunct Mars. Now, Mars is, when we're going a little bit deeper here, Mars in the sign of Scorpio is quite strong, so it isn't the worst, let's put it that way. But it's still Mars. It still brings a certain type of aggression into the relationship because it's so closely conjunct the ruler of the seventh. So what does that mean? So one of the ideas, or one of the manifestations of this, can literally be that there are more arguments again, because again we're seeing many things that suggest the ruler of the seventh in the 12th, 6th from the 7th, and now Mars really closely conjunct it as well. So again, arguments, fights, aggression, things of those Martian nature. Obviously, it can bring, very sexualized relationships into the picture as well. But when we see Mars so closely, it can really, really bring in those, you saw maybe your parents fighting quite a lot, arguing quite a lot. Maybe there was even a divorce there. Very strong indication that there was a divorce there, especially when we had a little bit more from the chart. There's Neptune in the 4th. One of the parents was kind of missing or not there. So if you start to put these things together, again, let's bring even Saturn 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a square. Saturn to the relationship ruler, 4-degree orb, again quite close orb. So not the easiest chart if we're talking about relationships and getting into relationships in general. And now let's bring these two topics to kind of together as well. So at first, judging from this chart, we can see that most likely this person didn't have the best influences, role models from the point of view of relationships or marriage or kind of long-term partnerships, because their parents most likely argued a lot, fought a lot, maybe even got divorced. There was some trauma there, pain there, and now there's a very, very strong indication that in their childhood or in their adult life, they're still carrying on judgments, ideas about relationships that are to do with these role models. And furthermore, they might be attracting even relationships that are very similar to that into their adult life, and kind of reliving that trauma again and again and again and again. Now, this is where it gets sometimes people even don't want to get into relationship anymore. They don't really want to, kind of start even suppressing the desire, the need to be in a partnership. And that happens if you had that kind of continuous repetition of a trauma or a traumatic response, and you haven't kind of met it. So what needs to happen, and what needs to happen first to heal this, and what can happen after you start meeting those spaces within yourself? So first and foremost, you really need to kind of start dissecting your parents' relationship. What did you see there? What kind of role models did they give you? Did they fight a lot? what did you witness? And it's really important to understand, what did you actually witness there? What kinds of ideas and judgments do you remember giving towards them? And then when you start to understand these, when these energies start moving, it's important to also start being with them first and foremost, but also start accepting that this is how it was. And the acceptance of these matters starts to kind of clear, or make it more clear for you to understand why these things were happening, why they did the things that they did, and why they acted in certain ways that they did. Because a lot of, very often the child can even blame themselves in that, and you can still be blaming yourself, but it needs some kind of dissecting and understanding of what you specifically, how you personally were in those moments, and what did you kind of judge about the situation, and what did you start to believe about yourself and about relationships in general. When that happens, it's easier to start letting go. First and foremost, usually anger comes and kind of pissed offness comes, and that's okay. It's okay to process that anger and whatever basically comes after you are dissecting that relationship. It's okay to let it come up and to process in a safe space with people who you trust. And sometimes that is alone as well. And then it's easier to start releasing those judgments against these people, against these situations, against these moments, against these matters, let's say, that happened in those moments. And once that starts to happen gradually, now this is where it gets interesting. This is the moment where the resistance towards getting into relationships starts to be lifted as well. It's the place where the person starts to open up again to the idea or the concept of, okay, maybe I can really go into another relationship. And actually now, when that person goes into another relationships, they attract a different kind of partner as well. It doesn't mean that all of the kind of arguments are gone and they're just in bliss all the time and no arguments whenever. But again, it's a step up from, let's say, a very abusive, cheating relationship, and maybe you step into another one where there's more cohesiveness, there's more being together, there's more, maybe there's still arguments, and I think personally, arguing at times is quite normal. You need to kind of clear the air and kind of get your views on the relationship straight. But the point I'm making is, you let's say you start from a very low part here, where it's only cheating, only pain, only trauma. Then you heal a little bit of that and you get into a healthier relationship and a healthier, and the more you heal these layers and the more you release these judgments, the more healthier relationships you attract. And very often very often at times, what I've also seen is that the other person starts to shift as well. If the other person doesn't start to shift, they actually, usually the relationship breaks, and another one with let's say, healthier patterns comes your way as well. So there are a couple of ways this can manifest, but the important part here is the work that the person themselves actually does to kind of attract new people, attract new ways of being in relationship to them. And this actually, this I'm explaining it through relationships because I think it's a very good way of doing that, but it also applies to all sorts of areas in your life, work, career, bosses, money, very big topic, obviously. So a lot of business, I don't know, spirituality, some shape or form, most likely. But anyway, the point is to release judgments, to release hurt, to release pain, to be with yourself in those moments that you kind of suppressed, and then through that activity to heal, to accept, to basically, I would say it's a lot to do with acceptance, to heal and accept, and through acceptance, actually, the healing comes. Through releasing of these judgments, the healing comes, and then getting into the space of, now I'm ready again to get into a new relationship. And actually, when you do that work, you also start to understand more clearly what do you want, and you start to be more aware of patterns. People start to, maybe you still attract a little bit of that abusive style relationship, but then you're more aware of what is happening, and you're really okay with, breaking it off, maybe if you see some danger signs there early on. Now, I hope this helps, and I hope this kind of explains a little bit through astrology, as well, how we can, start to release, start to let go, start to kind of move on with our lives, and also kind of illustrate how deep these patterns very often run. And I've seen this very, very, very so much, because I've been doing this for a while now, and I'm seeing so many of these early patterns still repeat until the person starts to kind of release them, and then attract new experiences, new people, new jobs, new money, through just working a little bit with themselves and starting to release judgments towards some painful moments they witnessed and experienced during their formative years. So, guys, thanks a lot. I do speak a lot about these topics in my one of the webinars I did, so you can get that webinar in the link below, or the book version of the webinar. So go on and check that out as well. Ian Altosaar, the Freedom Astrology, are out for now. See you again soon, in the next videos.